Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed for the September Q&A series, and somebody has stopped jet setting, stopped his European tour, and he's decided, I'll do some work now. What do you got to say for yourself, Tim?
Yeah, sure. I've been back for a couple of weeks, but yeah, it's interesting to watch the Q&A by myself.
Yeah, not for the Q&A series. I had to get Balin in.
Yeah, that was good, I reckon.
Yeah.
Good change. I didn't have to do it, which was always nice. So
you were sipping something and just...
Yeah.
You probably weren't on a beach, though it might have been a cold one.
I was in Iceland for sure when you were filming it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was nice.
All right, well, anyway, enough about Tim and, his life. Let's get into the Q&A series. But before we do... Today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and the new Duranaut High Performance Thermal Paste. Duranaut offers extreme long-term stability combined with outstanding thermal conductivity, and this has been achieved through a specially engineered silicon oil combined with aluminium microparticles and zinc oxide nanoparticles of various shapes. Duranaut isn't electrically conductive and won't harden over time. For best performance, you'll want to apply a very thin layer, and to help with this, included is the TG Spatula Pro. The spatula's revised design allows for increased pressure during application, making it easy to spread a thin, even layer of Duranaut. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. Okay, Tim, interesting question here, and I'm sure you'll have some technical insight to the matter. Did you read about this when you were on holiday? Actually, this happened after your holiday, so I can't really give him crap about the holiday on this one. I want to, but it's not. Timelines don't work out. Anyway, what do you think the ramification of the recently announced investment of Nvidia into Intel will be on the industry?
It's pretty big news, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We probably would have covered it on the podcast last week if we hadn't already recorded the podcast when that news came out.
Yeah, we recorded the day prior to the announcement, right?
Yeah, so I think essentially, if you're not familiar with the news, this was a heavily upvoted question, so I guess most people are familiar, but I think Nvidia invested about $5 billion into Intel, and as part of that, they formed a partnership to create SoCs, so APU-type products, which have Intel x86 CPUs and Nvidia GPUs. So I think there's all sorts of complex dealings going on with this, both client parts, so consumer parts. There's some server/data center parts that they'll be working on as well. And I believe the parts will be packaged at Intel in some capacity. So the GPU tile, for example, might be manufactured at TSMC or whatever, and same with the CPU tile, but Intel will do the packaging and make some sort of APU product. So that's the gist of the news. So what impacts will this have on the industry? Well, I imagine this will have most of an impact on things where APUs make the most impact. So laptops, for example, which we don't really cover here at Harbour Unboxed, at least anymore. So I'm not overly familiar with the current SoC lineups, APU lineups from the brands. So how much of an impact that will have there. As far as I understand it, Intel is already dominant in laptop CPU sales, and Nvidia is the dominant GPU brand. So they seem to just be strengthening that more, is I guess my thinking. For desktop, I don't know what your thoughts are, but it seems like this will have pretty much no impact on the desktop market outside of maybe giving Intel more money to create products. An investment means they can invest that money in any way they want to. Maybe they'll invest more in desktop CPUs. But, people always talk about this theoretical future where everyone's using an APU in their gaming machine. The future will be you buy an Intel CPU that has a powerful Nvidia GPU attached to it. But anytime anyone said that, discrete graphics just gets more powerful and makes sort of these APU products not viable again. So would you see APUs as suddenly being viable if they made an Intel plus Nvidia APU?
First of all, they're not flexible enough. It doesn't really make sense to combine those two expensive products together, and it goes against what the PC platform is. And then it's the form factor. So separating those two things so you can focus cooling in each area just makes way more sense. Then you've got the upgradability. So I've never really seen the APUs making sense for stuff outside of mobile stuff, handhelds, home theater PCs, and then budget stuff. And even then the budget stuff, it's pretty questionable because there's been multiple times where you could buy a better CPU and a cheap discrete GPU and get better performance on both fronts. It's not... You don't get necessarily the compact form factor, but that often isn't a priority for the budget builders. So I can't really see a world where some technology or something happens that makes them specifically better that wouldn't make them better if you just separated them, like better again.
Yeah, that's right. And I think if they had to make like an APU for a desktop platform, it would need much more memory bandwidth than the current designs. And usually the thinking there has been, they have to move to like an integrated CPU on the motherboard, which would create even less flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
So not only you're not just like dropping in the CPU plus GPU together, now you have to buy the entire board with maybe the memory soldered on or whatever. Because a high performance APU, the GPU aspect of that requires a lot of memory bandwidth, more than dual channel DDR5 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's obviously going to be a problem. So yeah, I just don't see this having an impact in that front. I guess the other impact, of course, is Intel is kind of struggling in some ways. They still are the dominant brand for laptop components, for example, mobile parts, but they are struggling in things like servers. They are definitely struggling in desktop DIY stuff. So Nvidia's GPUs being the best, being able to integrate them into Intel products would probably is going to strengthen them for some server applications and stuff and make the company more competitive across the board, which will help Intel. I think, though, it's interesting seeing some takes in this saying that this is going to like massively hurt AMD or whatever. I don't know whether that'll be true. I'm guessing AMD is probably going to struggle a little bit more in laptop and mobile components because
how much more they could struggle.
But that's right. That's right, right? Like AMD is struggling to build market share in those segments. And then on top of that, Intel will still need to invest resources into making GPUs. I don't necessarily mean discrete GPUs, and we might talk about that in a future question, but with mobile GPUs, right? Like, let's imagine for a second that Intel changes their whole laptop portfolio to be Nvidia discrete graphics because of this partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And then years down the track, maybe 5 years after the deal signed, Nvidia goes, we're ending this partnership, ending this deal. We're not working with Intel anymore. We're going to go our own way. Maybe Nvidia will make an ARM CPU plus GPU or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Now Intel, who stopped developing their discrete GPUs or their GPUs for integrated graphics, they've now 5 years behind in integrated graphics development. And with mobile products, you need a GPU in those products. Then they're not viable without a GPU. And so that would just kill Intel's entire mobile line overnight. So even though the deal is investing, let's put some Nvidia GPUs into Intel products, they still will need to make their own Intel GPUs, because if they need to sort of hedge their bets a bit, like make sure that they can't get screwed over massively. And when I sort of look at the structure of the deal and the sort of things that go into it, Nvidia doesn't really need to do a deal like this. Like, they're not massively struggling for market share. They're not like, oh, we desperately need this like integrated product. It seems like Nvidia has all the power there. And so Intel is kind of, in some ways, I guess, maybe taking a deal to save the company. They've obviously had a lot of struggles. It kind of feels like that sort of deal, as opposed to two companies coming together when they're in the best possible position. And so I think that will mean that, Intel, they kind of can't get sucked in too much into going down the Nvidia path if Nvidia has all the power and could screw them in the future. But then again, executives, they love their short-term gains and stuff, so you never know. Maybe that's all part of it. But yeah, at least for like gaming side of things, I can't see it having a huge impact, but we'll see how it goes for like the mobile gaming and that sort of things.
All right, next one here looks to be a similar sort of question. In your opinion, how cooked is Intel Arc as a discrete GPU brand? I see Celestial discrete GPU happening, but if Intel has access to Nvidia iGPUs, what's the point? Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of talked about, I guess, the reasons why I think they can't just cancel GPU development of any kind, because they could get screwed over by Nvidia pretty easily in that sense. So it's a hard one because the deal seems to be for APUs, so that should have no real impact on the discrete GPU side of things. Like, you would still purchase discrete GPUs from Nvidia, Intel, or AMD separately to having the APUs. So from that sense, they should probably still continue Arc. They should still continue it from the sense that, again, like, Nvidia could screw them over if they just cancel all of their GPU development, and then Intel would be relying on third-party GPUs for their own products in the future, which would be a real disaster for them if a deal goes south. So they should still be developing Arc GPUs. I don't think there's any this should really change anything about that development. I think if anything, if they were going to cancel Arc, it would be because those products are not viable, not anything to do with the Nvidia deal. And I think they've even said as a company that Arc GPUs will continue. At least that's their current stance. So that's what I would expect from here on out. Will it affect Arc GPUs in integrated products? Probably, but on the desktop side, probably not that much.
With Nvidia investing $5 billion into Intel recently, we've heard about that. Can you see a future where Nvidia GPUs are made on Intel nodes? What would have to happen for that to occur?
I think Nvidia uses the nodes they use because they're the best nodes. Nvidia always wants the best performance. They're not super interested in like crazy cost savings. Maybe they use what was it, Samsung 8nm back in.
That was the 20 series, I believe.
Yeah, the 20 series. I think they probably used, was it 30 series? Can't remember. One of those series was, we'll put the answer on the screen right now, put some little text. Whatever series it was, they did that potentially because of cost reasons. But I think since then, they've been trying to go the best node for the best performance, the best products. And so the only reason I could see them using Intel's nodes would be because Intel nodes are the best. I don't think this deal will have any impact on Nvidia choosing to manufacture things at Intel. They'll still try and, as I said, sort of make the best products that they can. So that would have to be the only reason, really. If Intel manages to get their nodes up to a standard that Nvidia feels that they're the best products to be used, then they'll use them. If not, then they'll just continue to use TSMC.
This is like for political reasons, like the tariffs and stuff, so they can make them in America and not in Taiwan, for example, and then that makes them more accessible to the US market and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah, I guess there is that angle, isn't there? Like, the whole, it may be economically not viable, or maybe they just block exports or imports or whatever. TSMC, that they are building fabs and stuff in America, but I think they're still like the node behind all the leading edge stuff is still being done in Taiwan. So political ramifications could be one angle there. But I think Nvidia would probably try fight that pretty hard if it results in them making a worse product.
It depends on what goes on behind the scenes there, I'd say.
Yeah, I guess so. We'll see. Do you think there's a conspiracy where game developers collaborate with hardware manufacturers and use high-intensity engines to maintain high-end PC hardware sales?
So really, are the GPU manufacturers bribing or incentivizing the game developers to make their games more demanding than they would have otherwise to encourage people to upgrade to play the game?
That's right, because there's no reason the game developer would do that.
Yeah, there's no benefit to them other than receiving money directly from AMD or Nvidia.
Yeah, because it kind of goes against the game developers' philosophies. They want their games to be played and bought by as many people as possible. And so the only reason to go against that would be, like a financial incentive or something like that. So I guess this question has come about because of things like Borderlands 4, where the game runs pretty badly and seems to be... like the badass preset is very intensive for no seeming benefit. And there's been other games as well that have integrated, whether it's ray tracing is always on, or there's like a path tracing feature or something like that that makes them quite intensive.
Yeah, so I don't think if there is any kind of collaborative effort or whatever, certainly on the game developer side, that's not their intention. We do know of games where certain companies have got involved and wanted their technologies or technologies that they perform better with implemented into a game. So we've heard stuff like they'll support the game developer by paying for engineering costs and developer costs and all that sort of stuff, or covering them, providing them with, manpower essentially to make the game and stuff like that. So I think that happened. We had an example given to us at Computex with the new Doom, the Dark Ages game. So ray tracing was implemented in that game. That wasn't something I think the developer necessarily had in mind initially, but Nvidia came on board, again, provided them with manpower and stuff to make the game. And we're like, well, one of the requirements is we want the game to be, RTX. So have ray tracing and stuff like that implemented in the game. So again, it's just the game developer kind of complying with those terms to get the necessary resources to make their game, or at least make it more cost effective to make the game.
I think so. I guess there's like multiple ways that it happens as well, because there's the example you brought up, but then there's things like Cyberpunk 2077, which has obviously been like a leading game for Nvidia technologies for a while.
Mm-hmm.
They updated it with things like path tracing, which wasn't in the launch version. The launch version had ray tracing effects, then was later, launch titles for frame generation and stuff like that. So there clearly is collaboration between some developers for those sorts of things,
Mm-hmm.
so they can always be used. But then Cyberpunk, eventually, it does actually scale quite well to lower end GPU hardware. So it's not so much a case of you need to buy an expensive high end GPU, maybe giving more GPU sales to play Cyberpunk, because you can't play it on like low or medium settings on a lot of GPUs. It's more, these are the attractive features that you can use if you had bought the high-end GPU.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably more of what happens. There's more sort of, we want like Nvidia or even AMD, they want high-end features to be in these games so that you feel like when you have spent money, that you've spent money to get something in return. If there were no ray tracing games, no frame generation games, then why advertise those features? It's kind of pointless. You wouldn't be feeling like you're getting value out of those advertised features when they announce the products. So they try and get those features in a lot of games. So that, from that sense, it makes sense for Nvidia. I don't think they do as much of the whole, let's make this game run really badly so that your old mid-range GPU is now inadequate.
There's definitely been examples. Again, I agree with you, and I don't think this is something that happens often. There's outlier examples, like Crysis comes to mind, where they used excessive amounts of tessellation, because that's something Nvidia did better than AMD at the time.
Was that Crysis 2?
I think it was Crysis 2, yeah. It was the
Yeah.
follow-up one. So, I mean, that has happened before, where something has been used in excess, not to enhance the playing experience or even the visuals, but to favor one brand over the other.
Oh, for sure. I can't remember with that Crysis example, because it was a while ago, whether that affected like all of the settings or whether that was just like the highest end, like you turn up to Ultra and then AMD performance went to crap. I can't remember whether that was the case across all the presets or whatever, but certainly there's been other examples like Hairworks. Like Nvidia creates a feature Nvidia has claimed in the past that they never deliberately made Hairworks run badly on their competitors' products. However, there is strong evidence in the performance of those features that it did run way better on Nvidia GPUs.
Initially in The Witcher, it was used, again, like tessellation in excess, to the point where it ran okay or okay-ish on GeForce GPUs and totally crippled Radeon GPUs of the time. And then it was months later through optimization, they were like, oh, we could dial this back significantly, use like a quarter of what we were using and still get pretty much the same visual representation. And hey, it runs way better on everything, and now Radeon GPUs can do it as well. So again, whether that was on purpose or not, or they just didn't have enough time to optimize it, don't know, can't say for sure, but it was another sort of suspect thing. And we've seen like tessellation, Hairworks, and then into ray tracing. And it's dubious as to whether or not those features are always implemented to enhance the experience for gamers or just sell more GPUs and give one brand an advantage over another.
I mean, I think it definitely helps with high-end GPU sales, but I think if we look at the examples of, let's say, the worst optimized games of this year or the last couple of years, the ones that always run badly no matter what settings you enable, like a Borderlands 4, I don't really see anything in Borderlands 4 that indicates like Nvidia or AMD went into the game and was like, let's make this run really badly overall so that gamers now want to upgrade their GPUs. I think that is much more a case of the developer making some questionable decisions in the development process, not putting in the time and effort to optimizing the game, and then obviously using Unreal Engine 5, which seems to have just general issues with it running on all sorts of levels of hardware, which you can't really... Maybe they've gone into the game engine and screwed it up on purpose, but I think that's more of just like a general engine issue. So I think, that, and then, like a Monster Hunter that came out earlier this year that ran quite badly, those sorts of games, I think that is just the developers. It's not a conspiracy to make you want to upgrade. I think the developers in particular do genuinely want their games to run on as many hardware configurations as possible. But then when it comes to like, your gorgeous looking visuals, they're sort of trying to balance the look and feel that they wanted to implement from a development standpoint, and then the accessibility across a wide range of hardware. So for games like Alan Wake, for example, they know this game probably isn't going to run on super old hardware, but we'll try and make it run reasonably okay on low settings for as many people as we can while still preserving the visuals that they want.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's most of what happens. But yeah, certainly for those higher end features, there's been incentives over the years for sure. Older flagship GPU versus newer low end / mid range newer GPU. For example, GTX 1080 Ti versus RTX 5050. So I guess it's going like, which one of those would you opt to use, or maybe even buy, like used versus new?
So the assumption is performance is similar when,
Yeah.
let's say, not exceeding VRAM, because one has more VRAM than the other. And so you're basically comparing buying a used 1080 Ti
Yeah.
to a new 5050.
Yeah.
And similar performance, similar price comparing used to new, but the older GPU, more VRAM, so therefore better.
Yeah.
What's it got, like 3 more?
Yeah, it's 11 gig versus 8 gig.
Yep.
So
Yep. Okay. Really, the only advantage of the Pascal GPU is the extra VRAM. Am I overlooking anything? I don't.
No, because it doesn't have a DLSS because there's no tensor cores.
That's a big one.
Won't support that. You'll be stuck using at best FSR3, I guess. Power consumption will be worse because it's a much older product.
I think it's like double.
You won't have access to the latest display engines and display hardware or video encoders. There'll be much older stuff. Do they even support Pascal drivers? I think they just recently discontinued them or are close to discontinuing.
I'm not sure what the state is there, but that's a huge one because, first of all, when new games come out, they'll be prioritizing Blackwell GPUs over Pascal for sure.
Yeah.
So it'll be like, maybe it just works on Pascal and some optimization work may occur there over the coming months. Who knows? But priority drivers and then driver support. So how much longer are they going to... If you buy a 1080 Ti today, if you buy either of these GPUs, the assumption is you want to keep them for a minimum of 3 years. We've covered this 1,000 times on the channel via polling data with you guys. It's usually 4 to 5 years you want to keep it for. There's basically no chance in 3 years from now Pascal GPUs are still receiving, current driver support. 4 years, 5 years, no chance, I would have thought. So I don't know how much longer, if they haven't already. I'm pretty certain it's still being supported, but I'm not 100% up to date on that information. It'd be borderline, I would say.
Yeah, and you are going to run into games on the 1080 Ti that won't work because they require ray tracing, or at least hardware accelerated ray tracing. So like Indiana Jones is one example that comes to mind. Even the new Doom game, where it's built-in ray tracing, won't load on a Pascal GPU. I'm not even sure how well it would have run if it could have been loaded, but those games just won't work. So you're closing yourself off to those titles, and then like drivers support. There'll be some examples where games in the next few years will run, even though the performance of those two cards is supposed to be the same, will theoretically run a lot worse on the 1080 Ti. Like, it has more VRAM, but I think those other things are pretty significant negatives.
As important as VRAM is, it's not everything, and it's a consideration, but there's a lot of other things you have to consider as well. So while I would say there's no good option out of those two, if I had to pick one to use moving forward over the next 3 to 4 years, it would be the 5050. But yeah, I wouldn't buy 5050 unless I absolutely had to. I would try and get like a 5060 Ti 16GB, which admittedly, what are they? They're over $400.
Yes, yeah.
So I'd probably recommend like a 9060 XT 16GB, which is less than $400 US. Not a lot less, but it is less.
Yeah.
But anyway, but again, it depends. You might just be playing like Counter-Strike 2 and stuff like that. So a 5050 is okay for that. I think a 5060 would be better value though. So I'd probably recommend getting that. Anyway, that's a whole different thing. I would go for the newer GPU for, ongoing driver support. Drivers are going to be supported for a longer period of time. Another thing I don't know if we touched on, warranty. So you're not buying a super old graphics card that could die in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You're buying a brand new product with brand new product warranty. So that's probably a big one. There's a huge value component, added to that. So although they're the same price, having a warranty adds considerable value, and then it uses half as much power. So therefore it'll run cooler, probably quieter, won't be as big and bulky, all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
I think the warranty becomes more of an issue the newer this comparison would be, because obviously we're talking about here like Pascal versus the lowest end Blackwell card. But if you did like a 2080 Ti versus, you know, whatever the comparison is in Blackwell, or a 30 series product versus the current, like a used 30 series versus new 50 series, then yeah, the warranty starts becoming more and more important. Because yeah, like a 2080 Ti can run things like DLSS, has a similar amount of VRAM to a 1080 Ti, so it's going to be a little better on that features support front, but then still things like warranty can come into it and become, you know, a pretty significant factor. And it depends how long people have had their cards for, especially, you know, you might see a lot of ex-mining stuff out there still that's been absolutely flogged. So
that's the pitfalls of buying used. You have no idea how heavily the card's been used. Does it need repasting, for example? There's a whole heap of stuff there to consider when buying used.
I mean, there's definitely value in the used market. It's just one of those things you have to toss up between, like, again, like 2080 Ti, probably more VRAM than what you'd get around the same price new. So how much are you weighing that versus the other factors new architectures get optimized for? And even if the drivers are supported for a long time, the new architectures just generally get the bulk of the optimizations in game engines and stuff. You know, the new DLSS 4, for example, runs a lot better the newer your RTX hardware is. There's more of a performance penalty as you go back. So these are all things to keep in mind when buying those cards, because it seems like they're still pretty popular, some of those old models. So yeah, lots of things to weigh up there.
And that is going to do it for part 1. We will have a part 2 and a part 3 because Tim's back working now, so we figured we'd do the full 3 series.
You did 3 last time. What are you on about?
Yeah, I did 3. Thank you.
Well, you got to count Balin's contribution in there as well.
Yeah, I did 2.5.
Yeah,
2.5, and then to be fair, Balin probably did the majority of that episode. But yeah, anyway, a lot of fun. Good to have Tim back for some friendly banter on the Q&A series and answering all of your amazing questions. But we will be doing it, as I said, another 2 times for this month, and then, you know, the next month and so on and so forth. Anyway, thanks for watching. We've got the Patreon stuff, the join button stuff. That'll give you access to our exclusive Discord server, monthly live streams, which we're going to do shortly, but we'll do another one next month because it's a monthly live stream. Behind the scenes content, Q&A stuff. Check it out if you're interested. If not, that's perfectly fine. And Tim and myself would like to thank you for watching this video. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.